Hi class, and welcome to lesson 9 where we are going to be talking about responsive web design. So in this lesson we're going to learn how to use flexible layouts, media queries, and flexible media. So creating a flexible layout is important because many users have different types of screens. So somebody might be viewing your website on a mobile device in portrait mode, somebody might be viewing it in landscape mode, or somebody might be viewing it on a laptop or a desktop computer. So typically our websites used to be built in fixed measurement units such as pixels or inches. But now with the addition of responsive design, we are continually changing from device to device, and we need to have a layout that can adapt to that change. And fixed values have too many constraints. So we've moved on from using fixed values to percentages. So the formula to figure out your percentage for different elements is target width divided by the context width, and that will give you the result in a decimal form, and then you just have to convert it to a percentage. So we are going to do a little bit of math here, so just hang on for a minute. The result at the end will need to be multiplied by 100 to get the percentage value. Okay, so let's talk about our layout here. So if we look at this HTML code, we have a div that wraps around two boxes. So one of them is called section and one of them is called aside. There's nothing really specific about these boxes yet except what we're going to add over here in the CSS. So in the CSS, we've given the body a background color of gray, and the div has a width of 600 pixels with a background color of gray as well, I guess. So this box right here is 600 pixels wide. Okay, and then you have your section and your aside boxes that have margins, backgrounds, rounded corners, text colors white, display block, font family, font size, padding, text align. Okay, and then you have a specific styling applied to the section. It's float left, like we were doing earlier in our 2-column layout, and its width is 400 pixels wide, so it takes up that much of the 600. And then the aside box floats to the right, and its width is 100 pixels wide. Now you can see over here that it's getting cut off because you're not seeing the other rounded corners and you're not seeing the last part of the text. So something's wrong here. We're not seeing all of our boxes. Okay, so the reason is because we have a width of 400, a width of 100, that's 500 if you add those together. And then we also have margins on all four sides. So if you think about it, you've got 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 10 pixels. So that's another 40. So you're at 540 pixels. And you have padding. You have to account for the padding as well. So that's another, I don't know, another about 100, like 96 pixels. So that's pushing us way over the 600 mark right here, and that's why you're not seeing the rest of that box. So with flexible grid layout, we change all of the measurements from pixel measurements to percentages. And the way to do that is with that formula like it said before. So you take what you want the width to be, so 10 pixels, and you divide it by the actual width of the container, which is 600, and that's going to give you a decimal value that you then change to a percentage, and you can use that percentage in your CSS code. So here's what happens if you do that. So you take 10 divided by 600, this is your margins, and your margin is going to be 0.016666, and then you times it by 100, so 1.66% for your margin. Then you do the same thing with the width of each box. So you take the 400 pixel box and divide it by 600 pixels, and you get 66.66%. And then your other box, you do 100 pixels divided by 600 pixels, and you get 16.6%. So when you change those to percentages, then it's going to look like this. Okay? So that's kind of an example of how to go from fixed values to percentages. Okay, now we're going to be talking about media queries. So a media query is what you use to define different styles based on the type of viewing screen. So whatever screen your user pulls your website up on will be told to the browser, and then the browser will choose those styles that only go with that particular screen size or screen width. So you use the @media rule inside of an existing style sheet, or you can create a separate style sheet to handle your media queries. So in your style sheet, you're going to have this rule @media, where the screen has a max width of 1199 pixels. So you can choose what you want here. And it may change based on like the width of the iPhone at the time. But it should be, the max width should be at the edge of the phone viewing pixel capacity. So 1199 is pretty wide. That's like the width of maybe a laptop or a desktop. Okay. And then when you use that file in your HTML document, you use this code right here, link style sheet style.css, and then you have the media definition right there. So you use this style sheet when somebody is looking at your website with a screen width of 1199 or less. So a media query may include a media type, which we have screen here as our type, followed by one or more expressions. So max width, min width, anything like that. Media types include all, screen, print, TV, and braille. Most of the time we just use it for screen. If no media type is specified, the media query will default to using screen. The expression that follows the media type may include different media features and values and must return as true for the styles to be applied. If they return as false, the style is then ignored. So you're basically creating a question that gets asked to every user that pulls up your website, but it's not asked to them directly. It's asked to their phone and or their laptop, and the laptop responds and says, I am this wide, this many pixels. So you use these rules. So the idea is that you can have different layouts if people are viewing it on their phone, or you can have a different layout if somebody is viewing it on their computer. So in media queries, you can use and terms to join certain ones together. You can use not, and you can use only. The and logical operation allows an extra condition to be added, making sure the style does not get applied until all conditions are met. So if you use and, That means the device has to have a minimum width of 7/68 and a maximum width of 1199. So it has to fit in between those two for those conditions to apply. The not logical operator negates the query, specifying any query but the one identified. Don't use that one very often. And then the only logical operator is a new operator, and it's only recognized by the HTML5 algorithm. Therefore, any browser using the HTML4 algorithm will ignore these media queries. So a very common condition that you'll be using for mobile devices is the orientation condition. So you can determine whether they're viewing it in landscape or portrait mode. The landscape mode is triggered when the display is wider than taller. The portrait mode triggers when the display is taller than wider. So you can have different ways of displaying your website based on if somebody's looking at it in landscape mode or portrait mode on their phone. All right, so we learned how to convert fixed values like pixels to relative values like percentages. I would recommend doing that when you're building websites, especially with column layouts and images. And then we also learned how to manipulate CSS with media queries. So you can use media queries to change your website based on the type of screen your viewer is using.